Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Studio, and we have the honor and privilege of having fellow rogue pharmacist, Ben Fuchs on our show today. He has a very successful radio show, and we'll talk about that also. And we'll talk about what made him change his thinking about pharmacy in general, because he thinks a lot like Janet and I that many medications that are prescribed for long-term treatments are probably not the best thing for us. He believes in lifestyle changes and lifestyle modifications to treat most chronic disease. So he's preaching to the choir today when it comes to Janet and I, and probably our listeners and viewers, because I think that's why a lot of you guys tune in, because we have some different approaches to what we decide, how we educate you and empower you to take charge of your own health. So first of all, first day of September, amazing. The weather feels like fall out there. It was 37 degrees down south of us in the Tri-City area. So definitely cooling off, and I'm enjoying it. So also, as always, you can tune in on my Facebook. We are streaming live on my personal Facebook page, and you can always call in to ask questions, 509-537-0411. And even if you don't call in live to the show, you can use that number to call in later on, and I will personally answer that call. It forwards to my cell phone. So thank you all for listening and tuning in. Make sure that you go to your favorite podcast forum and like and subscribe and comment. So if you have any subject matter that you would like us to talk about, please let us know. Also, YouTube, check out our YouTube and Rumble. Our Rumble is growing tremendously because some of the platforms censor us. Rumble does not censor us. So please go to our Rumble account and subscribe to our Rumble account. You don't want to miss that. So Ben, without further ado, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Shawn. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So, first of all, I want you to tell a little bit about your story. There's, you were talking before the show how you're a rogue pharmacist, and right. I guess you fit right along with Janet and I being rogue pharmacists. Yeah. So,
I suspect there's more of us than we know. I suspect
there is. Yeah.
Pharmacists tend to be compliant. Pharmacists, I noticed that the personality type of a pharmacist is more like a follower than necessarily a leader. But there's some of us, like you and your wife and myself, who don't fit that bill, and that's why I say we're rogue. We went rogue. Pharmacy is the art of taking orders. That's what pharmacists do. We take orders, right? The doctor gives us an order, and we fill the order. But every once in a while, there's like a black sheep pharmacist, a rogue pharmacist that really wants to do more than take orders. That's what I wanted. I'm assuming you guys are the same way. We wanted to do more than take orders, and we kind of smelled something wasn't right. Our patients kept coming back. I don't mean to speak for you, but speaking for myself, and perhaps you felt the same way, our patients kept coming back and they weren't getting better. And we knew the toxicity and the side effects, because that's what you study in pharmacy school. Probably a good 50 or 60% of the pharmacy school, if not more, is spent understanding toxicity and mitigating toxicity, right? So you figure your patients are coming back, they're not getting better, they're being put on more and more medications, and not only that, they're being put on medications to take care of the side effects of other medications. And then on top of all that, there's a whole toxicity profile that you got to deal with. And then on top of all of that, there's another world of medicine that is not drugs. We collapse the idea of medicine and drugs together because since the middle of the 19th century, the two have been kind of the same. And so we are conditioned as a general public, and also as pharmacists and healthcare professionals in general, are conditioned to believe that medicine equals drugs. But that's not how it always was. That started in the middle of the 19th century with the advent of organic chemistry and aspirin and the whole pharmaceutical or pharmacomedical model. Before then, medicine was herbs and medicine was food. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. So those of us who really want to practice medicine, and again, I don't mean to speak for you, but probably you're the same way, didn't necessarily equate that with drugs. We wanted to help people with medications, but not necessarily with medications that would ultimately kill them. And you said something very interesting. You said most medications, and you said most chronic diseases. I would say all. I would tell you that all medications by the very definition, drugs by the very definition of drugs are designed to suppress biochemistry. They are by their very nature by their very nature, by definition, they are anti-health in the name of modification of symptoms. So in the interest of changing symptomology, we suppress health. And that's not what I signed up for. In fact, when I went to tell you my story, I was always fascinated by chemistry. I was one of those kids that had a little chemistry set, you know, growing up with the potassium.
That's
right. Right. So I was always just blown away by molecules and by how the whole thing worked together. And then I took a course in college called psychopharmacology, where we studied the biochemistry, the neurochemistry of the brain and of thoughts and of thinking and of perception. And it just blew me away, this idea that everything we know as reality is really the end result of molecules and ions and changes in hormones and chemicals that are going on in the brain. So I wanted to study how molecules and chemicals could be used to change our perceptions of reality. And the first thing I thought of was food. And I thought that there was a relationship, this was as an 18, 19-year-old, I thought there was a relationship between food and how we think by virtue of this biochemical interactions, by virtue of the biochemical interactions that occur in the brain, food being biochemistry, basically. So I wanted to study food, how food acted as medicine. I was also a bodybuilder and a weightlifter, and I was working with food and I was working with nutrition. So my idea when I went to pharmacy school, silly me, was that pharmacists would really be studying how the molecules in food could interact with the body to create healing. And I remember going to my first day of pharmacy school, and by then I was married and I had moved to another state and I had been accepted into pharmacy school. And I remember going into the dean's office. They interview all the new pharmacy students. I don't know if they did that. You, right? So they interview all the new pharmacy students. And so I go to the dean's office and I said, so why do you want to be a pharmacist? I said, I want to study food as medicine. And I'll never forget, Dean Irwin, he laughed like that was the funniest joke he ever heard in his life. And he said, that's not what we do here. We study drugs. We study pharmacy. You're going to be a pharmacist. You're going to be dispensing drugs. And by then, I was already in pharmacy school. I already accepted. I had a kid. I was married. You know, my whole life was directed to being in pharmacy school. So I was like, I heard pharmacists make a lot of money. So I was like, okay, I'll proceed and I'll go ahead. But I was troubled from the very get-go because, like I said, we're studying toxicity. And I didn't really want to do toxicity. I wanted to help people. And it just never made sense to me how we could consider these things that have these toxicity profiles that have to be mitigated in development and in the laboratory and in clinical practice as healing modalities. And then something very interesting happened about my second year, and probably this happened to you too. We started studying nutrition, except we didn't study nutrition like a dietitian studies it, or like a doctor studies it, or like a cook or chef studies it, or a nutritionist studies it. We study nutrition like a pharmacist. In other words, we study the therapeutic value of vitamin A, of vitamin C, of selenium, of zinc, of cartilage, of glucosamine. We study how these molecules could be used, number one, therapeutically, but we also study how disease states could be the end result of deficiencies in these molecules. And I think, keep in mind, I'm already on track working with food and working with nutrients, and I was a weightlifter and a bodybuilder and an athlete. So I'm already hip to understanding how nutrition works to help the body. And then I start to learn, wait a minute, you can use nutrients for night blindness. You can use them for dry skin. You can use them for diabetes. You can use them for cardiovascular health issues. So that was all I needed to hear. And I immediately made it my life's mission to understand how we could use nutrition to help heal the body. And I graduated. I worked in the I think I told you this, when I was in pharmacy school, I worked in the skincare. I was in the skincare business. I am in the skincare business. And when I was in pharmacy school, I never worked in pharmacies. I didn't get my internship hours in pharmacies like my fellow students. I got my internship hours in the Blistex lab. The guy who invented Blistex was a professor at the University of Colorado. He was a retired professor, actually, but he was a celebrity. He had invented Blistex, and the Blistex Corporation gave the University of Colorado money, and the University of Colorado gave the Blistex Corporation a laboratory, and Dr. Jones would be in the laboratory. And he would hire students, and I was one of the students who was his research assistant, and that's how I learned skincare. But the point is, I didn't know pharmacy. I didn't really know what a pharmacist did because I didn't really work in a pharmacy. So I graduated pharmacy school. I go out to work in the pharmacy, and for some reason, I don't know why, but it didn't click that I was the guy dispensing the poison. I was the guy giving out the stuff that I was reading was so toxic that you had to watch out for people overdosing. You had to be careful with the dosages and the frequency of the doses, et cetera. And all of a sudden, I just decided you know what? I am going to start talking to people about nutrition. And keep in mind, this is 1986. Okay, this is not. There's no health food stores everywhere, and people don't know about vitamins, and they're not. You know, if you're still a health nut if you take supplements or you're jogging, right? So I started telling people about supplements. They would come in for their calcium channel blocker. I'd be like, you know, magnesium, that's a natural calcium channel blocker. Maybe take some magnesium with your calcium channel blocker, you know, or they'd have a cold to get antibiotics. Maybe want some vitamin C with that, or maybe you want some probiotics with that. And you know what? People would get better. They would be able to reduce their dose of medicine, of their medications. They would feel better. They would have less side effects on their toxicity. So I started to get a little cocky. And instead of recommending magnesium with their calcium channel blocker, I started suggesting magnesium instead of their calcium channel blocker.
Wow.
Right? And so needless to say, Kmart Pharmacy wasn't exactly thrilled with pharmacist Ben. And I was sent packing, you know, I was sent on my way, and I started my own pharmacy. I started a skincare pharmacy where we had no drugs in the pharmacy. All we did was topical preparations, things that I created, as well as nutritional supplements. And I started talking to people about nutritional supplementation. I started talking to people about skincare. I started developing some theories and some concepts around skincare formulation. I started a skincare company. I started doing lectures. I got a reputation. Long story short, 25 years later, I started in 1991. So what, almost 30 years later, now I'm considered to be a go-to person in terms of pharmacy and nutrition, as well as in skincare. And that, in a nutshell, is my story. But what I really want people to do is not necessarily understand nutrition and not necessarily understand skincare products or skincare, but understand themselves. Understand this magical, miraculous system called the human body. Because if we understand the human body, if we understand how our body is put together, if we understand the nature of the immune system, if we understand what a cell really is, if we understand how the whole thing is put together, we will have so much more power in our lives, and we will be so much harder to intimidate. And that's really the problem. And I'm sure you see it. People are scared. They don't know. They don't know why their heart they're having a heart attack, or why their heart is blocked. They don't know why they're getting colds all the time, or getting cold sores all the time, or have wrinkles or dark spots. They don't know why their diseases are showing up, because they don't know their bodies. And when you don't know something, it engenders fear. In fact, the only way to dismantle fear is to really understand something, to really know something. And so my mission today in life is to help people know themselves. And by know themselves, I don't mean just know themselves physically, know themselves spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, as well as physically. I call it SMEP, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical, so they can optimize this super high performing system that we call the human body.
Amen, brother. I think our podcast is done. We can probably just quit right now. Thank you so much. That was very, very educational. And our goal of this podcast is to educate and empower consumers to take charge of their own health. And it sounds like that's what you've been doing for almost 40 years now. So
yes.
Kudos to you.
Thank you. Now, kudos to you as well.
Thank you so much. Now, you also have a very successful radio show. Can you tell us how that came about and what you talk about on the radio show? Because I've been a guest on your radio show. Thank you so much for having me on.
I got to have you back on. You were a hit. I got to definitely have you back on, Shawn.
Awesome.
So you know, I told you I loved chemistry when I was a kid, but I also loved radio when I was a kid. And I don't know if you did this, you know, you're a little younger than me, but we used to have a little tape. We used to have these cassette tape recorders, and we would, you know, pretend we were disc jockeys on the cassette tape recorder and play songs. And I'm fascinated by radio. I was fascinated by the medium. I loved listening to talk radio. I loved listening to the interactions between the host and between the guests. I loved listening to disc jockeys and their pattern. It just, for some reason, it really fascinated me. So I wanted to become a broadcast journalist. That was what my goal was when I went to school. In fact, I have a degree in broadcast journalism. I went to Syracuse University. My first degree is a pretty useless at the time broadcast journalism degree. And that's one of the reasons I decided to go back to pharmacy school, because I wasn't very successful as a broadcaster. But as things are, you know, everything always works out, right? I because of my background in radio, and because of my love of radio, and because of my love of journalism, I managed to combine the two. And so one day I was in my laboratory. Let me digress a little bit. I was working in my lab one day, and I got a cassette tape in the mail. I don't know if you ever got these cassette tapes in the mail. This is the 1990s. And this was a cassette tape in the mail that said, "Dead doctors don't lie." Did you ever get one of those?
Oh, I've heard of that.
Right?
I never got that cassette tape, but I've heard that story.
So I got a cassette tape in the mail. It said Dead Doctors Don't Lie. And I put the tape in, and there's this guy talking on the tape, and he sounds like he has this deep, booming voice. And he sounds like he's Moses on Mount Sinai. He's talking about selenium, and he's talking about glucosamine, and he's talking about nutritional deficiencies, and he's talking about diseases as the end result of nutritional deficiencies. And he's talking about nutritional supplementation. And he's talking about how his background as a veterinarian led him to, or his background as a farmer, he was a veterinarian, but his background as a farmer and being raised on a farm led him to understand that when an animal's sick, you give them nutrients. When they have cribbing diseases, or when they have skin diseases, or when they have any kind of illness, you give them minerals, and you give them food, you give them nutritional supplements. And so his whole thing was that we can correct our health issues with nutrition. And I'm already starting off on my journey of teaching people these ideas. This was probably 1995, 1996. So I've already been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and I was just absolutely blown away. And so one day I'm working out in the gym with my buddy, and this guy's name is Dr. Wallach on the tape, and I'm like lifting weights, and my friend Russ is spotting me, and I said, "Hey, I just got this tape in the mail. I've been listening to it. It's the most amazing thing." And it's this guy Wallach, Dr. Wallach, and my friend Russ is like, "I know Dr. Wallach. He comes in here all the time. You know, he comes to Denver all the time." And Dr. Wallach was starting a nutritional company, and he was traveling around the country preaching his message about nutritional supplementation. I'm like, "You know this guy?" He says, "Yeah, you want to meet him?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, I want to meet him." And sure enough, one day I'm in my lab. I had a pharmacy that was also a laboratory. It was a lab pharmacy. And I look out the window, and there's Russ and this little guy with a cowboy hat. He's walking up the steps. And sure enough, that was Dr. Wallach. And Dr. Wallach had a radio show. And me and Dr. Wallach start talking. And because I've been listening to his tape so much, he's thinking he's talking to his alter ego here, because I'm just repeating things back that I heard on the tape, and we're bonding and we're connecting. And again, this is the early days of nutrition. This is the early 1990s. This is 95-ish, 96-ish. So he thinks he's got and he did have a kindred spirit. And he asked me if I wanted to substitute on his radio show when he went out of town. And he had radio shows on 130 stations. And I'm just like this, beginning my career basically as a nutritionist and a pharmacist. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And I have a degree in broadcasting. So it's like the perfect thing. It's like it's like God dropped this right in my lap. And I really do believe that these things happen in a divine kind of way. And so I started doing his radio show, and he would go out of town and I would do it. And he went out of town a lot. So I became a regular on the show. One of the networks heard me doing the show, and they invited me to do my own show. And that was early 2000s, and I've been doing it I've been doing radio ever since, helping people understand how their bodies work, helping people understand nutrition. And you know what? Delving lately, I haven't done it as much because the cultural and political situation makes it harder to do. But also, I started getting into medical politics and health politics. And it's almost like, and I know you understand this as a fellow pharmacist, it's almost like there's a force that's arrayed against us, who are trying to shake things up, who are trying to shake up the status quo, trying to tell people that there are changes. So I started to delve into that, although I have to say over the last year, I've had to delve in it less and less because of the climate, the political climate. And I've also had to go to Rumble because I've been censored a lot. And I don't want to be an angry person about this, but I want people to be aware that the power structure, the establishment, as we used to call it, is not necessarily in the individual's interest. I always tell people there's a unhealthy relationship between the institution and the individual. The individual is in flux. Individuals change all the time. Individuals have emotions. The word institution comes from the word static. S-T-I-T in the middle of institution means static. An institution is something that stays the same. So the goal of an institution is always going to be different from the goal of the individual. And the institution doesn't bleed. The institution doesn't have a family. The institution doesn't have jobs. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have love. It doesn't have a heart. It's a static entity. The individual has all of these concerns that the institution doesn't have. So individuals always have to be very skeptical, very questioning about the motives of institutions, because the interest of an institution is not the same as the interest of an individual. So I was delving a little bit more into the political climate and the health politics or medical politics a little more than I'm doing now. Now I've kind of slowed it down, but we still delve into it a little bit. What do you feel? Do you do that? Do you dive into it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, Yeah. In fact, now that you say something, I wrote a book about it, and it's called Sickened: How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix
Right.
It. And, obviously the government is a big institution, and the government pays for
Biggest thing.
70%. Yeah. And they pay for 70% of all the healthcare in the United States already. So
Yeah.
if you believe that the government ruined healthcare, as I do, and a lot of people do,
Yeah.
even if you don't believe they didn't ruin it, if you believe that they can fix it, well, if they're 70% of the payer already and buying most of the healthcare, then how can they fix it? I mean, the only way. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Ronald Reagan had a famous phrase. He said, the worst 7 words in the English language: I'm here from the government. I'm here to fix it.
Yeah, right. And so really the only way they can fix it is to get out of it. And that's what I say in my book. That's one of the goals of my podcast, is to educate and empower consumers to be in charge of their own healthcare.
Yes.
And
your own health authority. I said, the word authority, like I was saying earlier, we were raised, I think before we went on air, we were raised to question authority in my generation, probably in your generation, to question authority. And the word authority comes from the word author, right? To write a story. When somebody's writing is your authority, they're writing your story. And when it's, when it's part of your life, that's one thing. Or if it's your, legal authorities or political authorities, that's one thing. But when it's a health authority, that's especially egregious. You don't want to let somebody else write your health story. That is a dangerous position to be in. That's a dangerous position for the individual to be in, because, as I said earlier, the job of our institutions here in this country especially is to make money, is to make profits. So our institutions that we trust to take care of our health, they're really not necessarily there to take care of our health. They're there to make sure that the economic interests are maintained. So even an organization like the Food and Drug Administration, there's the whole revolving door phenomena where the heads of drug companies end up being working for the Food and Drug Administration, or lobbyists end up working for the Food and Drug Administration. And it happens in other parts of the government as well, the defense industry in particular. But when it comes to our health, there's nothing more egregious than somebody who's pretending to be advocating in your interests, but who really has something, another interest, someone else's interest in mind, or another interest in mind. But here's the thing, Shawn. I don't like blaming somebody else. This is up to us as individuals. Yes, it's true that there are interests that are arrayed against our interests, but we don't have to listen. We don't have to participate. We can, all the stuff that's going on with the health challenges going on here. Everybody wants to, have injections to take care of their health and all of the things that are going on. I noticed that the lines at Chick-fil-A are just as long as they've ever been. The lines at In-N-Out Burger have not gotten any shorter. In fact, now they're even longer, and there are fights to get their hamburger first. People are fighting to get their hamburger first. In fact, they have to have the police here. When they open up a In-N-Out Burger, they actually have to have the police watching the crowds, the cars, because people are fighting to see who gets who gets their hamburger before the other person. So we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We can't abdicate our health or the health of our family to others, to government, to institutions, to the pharmaco-medical model. And I'm including pharmacists in that as well. You don't want to abdicate this very intimate part of our lives, which is the health of our bodies, to an outside force, because if you do, you're going to be, there's no way that your interests are going to be maintained. And we see this. We have more doctors, and I don't want to rip on any individual doctors. This is a paradigm we're talking about, a model. But we have more healthcare professionals, medical healthcare professionals in this country than ever before in the history of man. We got more medical devices. We've got more medical diagnostics. We've got all kinds of insurance. We've got all kinds of hospitals. We've got so many drugs. I don't know, thousands of different drugs. People are taking 4 to 5 billion prescriptions a year. People are taking. We are so medicalized, but at the same time, we're the fattest. We're the most cancer-ridden. We have the most diabetes. We're the sickest culture in the history of mankind at the same time as we are the most medicalized. Clearly, there's something wrong, right? Clearly, it's not working. And what's not working is we have abdicated our authority. We've given up our authority to somebody else that says, you fix me. And you know what? I have a lot of friends who are physicians. I got a lot of friends who are doctors, dermatologists and nurses and pharmacists and people who are involved in the medical model. And you know this as well as I do, Shawn. They don't know either. They're flying by the seat of their pants a lot of the times too. They're going by what somebody in medical school told them, or pharmacy school told them, or nursing school told them 40 years ago, 50 years ago. They're going by what they believe. They're going by what they learned, but they don't really know. We're always shocked when a physician makes a wrong diagnosis, or a physician makes a mistake, or a physician recommends a surgery that doesn't have to happen, or doesn't do a surgery that has to happen. But they're just humans. They're not you don't have to necessarily be a rocket science to be a doctor. Being a doctor is about understanding some clinical facts. And by the way, this is an important distinction. I know you know this, but most people don't. There's a very important distinction between clinical chemistry and biochemistry. Clinical chemistry is the chemistry of your cholesterol score. Clinical chemistry is the cholesterol of your BMI, or your thyroid hormones, or your thyroid hormone levels. Clinical chemistry is the chemistry of numbers. It's the chemistry of statistics. It's the chemistry of reference ranges. Biochemistry is the chemistry of you. It's the chemistry of your body, and you are not a reference range, and you are not a statistic. And when somebody says, I feel crappy, and they take your thyroid test, and the doctor says, well, your thyroid hormone is normal. What the heck does that mean? I feel crappy. Something's wrong here. Well, you are normal, or vice versa. Oh, your thyroid levels are low. I feel great, doctor. You got to get on this thyroid hormone because your test says your thyroid hormone is low. We have marginalized our own experiences, what we know is true, for the test score. It's like you go to a restaurant and you eat the hamburger, and you say to the waiter, "Oh, this hamburger is terrible." And the waiter says, "Oh, look here, the menu. It says delicious hamburger, the most delicious ham." I don't care what it says on the menu. That's hamburger's terrible.
Right.
That's sort of how we marginalize and we've dismissed our own personal experiences because, again, we don't trust ourselves. We don't believe we're smart enough. We don't believe we're capable enough. And that's the ultimate message. We are smart enough. We are capable enough. And just because somebody has an MD or an RN or RPH after their name, that doesn't make them an expert over your personal biochemical experience.
That's right. That's right. That's very well said. And one thing that I do on the show, and I talk to my patients too in the pharmacy, is that, don't trust me. Do your own research. I mean, I'm here to help educate you, but do your own research.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, with all these institutions that control healthcare, and you mentioned pharmacists being guilty of it, and doctors, and of course patients, is that, even health insurance companies, I should say, especially health insurance companies, they don't represent a patient's health at all. They don't care about the patient's health. They care about the bottom line only. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And essentially what individuals have done, whether it be doctors or pharmacists or nurses, is they have literally, and the patients have literally usually washed their hands of their own individual responsibility for checking into their own health, for taking care of their own health, and to seeing what's best for them. And they've given it to somebody else, whether it be a government entity, whether it be the health insurance company. And my goal, as always, in everything, not just medical stuff, but in everything, is that, individual liberty is what's important for people.
Yes.
And they need to take care of themselves and their family.
Yes.
Period.
Yes. Absolutely, 100%. And when you go to a doctor these days, in the old days, you go to a doctor, the doctor worked for you. You paid him, and he worked for you. These days, they don't work for you.
Oh,
they work for Kaiser.
That's right.
Kaiser's their boss, not you. So they got to do what Kaiser says to do. They got to give you the drugs Kaiser told them to give them, or whatever the HMO is. They go by the formulary, and you may need, this drug, but that's not on the formulary. This is on the formulary. That's what you're getting. You may need this surgical procedure, but that's not on the formulary. You're going to get that surgical procedure. And I don't want to be, again, I don't want this to be negative. I want this to be positive in the sense that we can make a difference ourselves. We can do it ourselves. The first thing you want to do is understand how your body is put together. It's not complicated. It's fascinating, really. Most people don't even know where their pancreas is. Most people don't even know where their gallbladder is or what their gallbladder does. I talked to a lady a couple of weeks ago. It just brought tears to my eyes. She was a kid. She had bad periods, right? She had menstrual problems when she was a kid. So instead of somebody saying, okay, what are you eating? What's your nutritional status like? Are you eating the wrong foods? Are you eating a lot of sugar? Are you eating a lot of fried fats? Or are you on essential fatty acids? They took her organs out. So now she's got all her female organs. She was in her early 20s and she's got all of her female organs taken out because she had menstrual issues. So now, of course, she's got food issues, okay, because there's a very important relationship between estrogen and the hormone system and foods. So now she's got food issues, so they want to take her gallbladder out. So they take her gallbladder out. Now she's got her gallbladder out. She's got her female organs out. Now she's got breast cancer and they want to remove her breasts. Okay, so she's in tears. I said, it all started at the beginning when you had bad menstrual cycles. Your estrogen is off. You're eating the wrong kinds of fats. Essential fatty acids could help you. I didn't want to make her feel bad about herself, but she said to me, she was in tears, and I was almost in tears. Said, I didn't know. Nobody told me. They just said I had to have my organs taken out. And this is, probably not the people listening to this program are not perhaps in this boat, but the vast majority of people are. They have bad periods. And the first thing they do is they take out their uterus or they give them a hysterectomy. Well, why don't we figure out why you're having bad periods? If you have a headache, you don't go to the doctor and says, well, we're going to cut your head off.
Right. Good right? Analogy. Right.
It's crazy. I tell people your body is like your baby. And when you have a symptom, your baby is crying. And yes, you can take scissors and cut your baby's tongue out, and then you don't have to hear your baby crying anymore. But that's not going to help the situation. The situation is to figure out, why is your baby crying? Is the window open? You need to close it. Does he need a blanket? Is he eating the wrong food? We want to figure out why our baby is crying, because this is our baby. And we are, in a way, relating to this like we're the parents. It needs us. Yes, the body is your best friend ever. It is your best friend on planet Earth from the day you're born to the day you die. Your body is your best friend, but it needs you like a baby needs a parent. It needs you to nurture it, to love it. And that, to me, that's what good food is. That's what good thoughts are. That's what quality feelings are. And that's what spiritual connection is. It's nurturance. It's love for the body. It's treating the body like you would a baby. And you don't poison your baby or cut your baby's tongue out or electrocute your baby. This is what the medical model does. It electrocutes us, it radiates us, it poisons us, and it surgically hacks us up. That's not how you treat a baby. When your baby is sick or crying or distressed, you figure out why your baby is sick and crying and distressed. There's always a reason. There's this word in medicine that always cracks me up. It's not really funny, but funny, but it's ironic funny. Idiopathic, right? Like, I don't know. It just happened. There's no known cause, right? We have no known cause for your psoriasis. There's no known cause for your eczema. There's no known cause for your gallbladder distress. Well, get that thought out of your head. Everything has a cause, and whether you know it or not, it doesn't mean there's no cause for it. Figure out what that cause is, and that, to me, is how we want to address the body. There's nothing in the body that doesn't have something associated with it that we can somehow modify, with the exception of perhaps mechanical traumas, like if you get hit by a car or something drops on your head. Other than that, the body is exquisitely responsive to the environment, and by changing the environment, you can change the body.
Absolutely. And, I think what's the saddest part, just backing up on the patient with, that had cycle issues. And so here we are, and we see it all the time because we specialize in hormone replacement in our pharmacy. And anytime, let's just face it, anytime there's a cycling issue, whether it be headaches that go around your cycles or whether you have, heavy periods or anything like that, that's a hormone related issue. If it follows a cycle, it's a hormone related issue. That's a symptom. Let's fix the problem, not just treat the symptom. That's and, right. Taking a 20-year-old's, ovaries out. The long-term side effects of that is horrible.
Exactly.
For bone density, heart health, skin health, all of it. Right.
We think that we can take parts out because we don't see the body as a system. The notion of systems is something that only became popularized in the 1940s. When we started to figure out networking with computers, they started to see that there's this phenomenon called a system, which is where you have one homogeneous unit that's made up of a bunch of heterogeneous parts. A bunch of different parts form an entire unit. And that's the definition of a system. But the point of a system is you can't take a part out and have the same system. Everything is interconnected. Right. And this is the problem with medicine. It has not caught up to this idea of systems. Although it's starting to, I will say, systems medicine is starting to become a thing, but it's still on the fringes. But even just we as individuals can understand, if you take your ovaries out, you're going to affect your breasts, you're going to affect your bones, you're going to affect your digestive system, you're going to affect your brain, you're going to affect every other part of the system, because once you take a part out, that system is now a different system. So the only time to take a part out of your body is when it's cancerous and you don't have any other options. If there's just pain in your gallbladder, that's not a reason to take the gallbladder out. Now, I know that when you have gallbladder pain, you're like, get this thing out of me. I don't want to feel it, but you're setting yourself up for other problems down the road. An alternative is to figure out what is going on with the gallbladder. But in order to do that, you have to understand what the gallbladder is, how it's structured. We have a relationship in biochemistry, I'm sure you know, it's called structure function. The function of an organ, or the function of anything, is dependent on its structure, which means if you want to optimize the function of a structure, if you want to optimize the function of your gallbladder or your pancreas or any other system, any other organ in the body, you have to understand the structure. And the structure of the gallbladder is it's a bag, and it has a little pipe that goes into it, and it has a little pipe that goes out of it. And if you have gallbladder pain, it's because there's something messed up with the pipe. So what you got to do is figure out, why is the pipe clogged? Why is the pipe sticky? Why is things not moving through the pipe as well as it should? And almost always with the gallbladder, with any other part of the body, what you're going to find is that when there is something going wrong, something has gotten into the system that has corrupted the system. Now, how do things get corrupt? How do things get into the system to corrupt it? Well, you can stick it in through your skin, into your veins, intravenous. And we know that if you're sticking things in through your veins, you run higher risks of autoimmune disease, you run higher risks of dementia, neurological issues, you run higher risks of all kinds of health problems if you're an IV drug user. We know this. But for most people, it's not IV that is the primary source of assault into the system. What is the primary source of assault into the system? Hello, it's food.
That's what we eat.
Right, it's what we eat. And when you consider that we're eating food that didn't exist 200 years ago, the foods we eat today didn't exist 200 years ago. In this evolutionarily designed system that has been around for millions of years, we've completely changed how we nourish it and how we feed it over the last 200 years. That's a blip. Even in the last 50 years. I mean, even if you're eating chicken, and even if you're eating meat, even if you're eating broccoli, it's still different than it was 200 years ago because of glyphosate and fertilizers and hormones and antibiotics and all the things that are in the water that's watering the organic broccoli. Even if it's organic, it's being watered with chloride and fluorine and fluoride and antibiotics. So of course the foods we're eating are going to have a negative impact on the health of the body, which is why, Shawn, every study that's ever been done on longevity, one of the reasons anyway, why every study that's ever been done on longevity shows that the less you eat, the longer you live. The less food you put in your body, the longer you live. I mean, that's the simplest way to increase your longevity, is to simply eat less food. I always tell people, and they always laugh, I'm sure you'll crack up when you hear this too, eating's for kids, eating's for children. When you reach a certain age, you don't need to eat as much. You need to eat tiny amounts. Eating is for when your body is in this growth mode. Once we reach the age of 40 and 50 and 60, we're indulging. We're not eating for nourishment. We're eating for indulgement. Not that you want to, obviously you have to have some nourishment into your system, but you have to have much less than we're led to believe that we have to have. And most of us this is really fascinating. Not only are we not getting the nutrients we need from food, but the nutrients we eat cost us nutrition, because the body has to mobilize the copper and the magnesium and the manganese and the vitamin C and all of the nutrients to detoxify the food, the components of the hamburger, the components of the Pringles, the components of the Snickers bar, the components of the pizza. Not only are they not giving us the nutrients, they're costing us the nutrients. And every time you eat food, even if it's good food, your body activates its immune response. It goes into postprandial inflammation. And this is after you eat good food. So the less you eat, the calmer the body gets, the more resources it has to build. It's like, do you want to spend your resources digesting your food? Or do you want to spend your resources building muscle or making more neural connections or fighting diseases? You want to digest your food, or you want to have a long life, basically? And that's what it comes down to after we reach a certain age.
Right. And one of the things that I tell patients and everybody in general is that eat to live, don't live to eat.
Right.
And it's amazing how little food we really need to sustain ourselves. And most people do not realize that. But if you look at, you look at traditionally in cultures like the Aborigine culture in Australia, on average, the Aborigine culture in Australia, when they weren't hunting, which, traditionally hunting, gathering cultures, they would only hunt like once a week. And then they would gorge themselves for 1 or 2 days and they'd fast for 1 or 2 days. I mean, seriously.
Generate ketones.
Yeah. Right? And they would eat 900 calories a day to sustain themselves. 900 calories. And on the back of a nutrition box right now from the US RDA, it says, the average American 2,200 calories a day. Are you kidding me? Most Americans that live a sedentary lifestyle do not need 2,200 calories a day, probably half that. And some women even less than that. I mean, there is a lot of women, smaller women, that need 800 calories a day to sustain themselves if they will live a sedentary lifestyle.
Well, if anyone's listening, just do this experiment and, just check this out. If next time you're really hungry, go cook a meal or make your food, put it on a plate, and then pay attention as you're taking a bite, as you're eating, pay attention to when you're not hungry anymore. Usually 2 bites and you're not hungry anymore. After those 2 bites, that all represents an excess that the body has to deal with. After those 2 bites, it takes about 2 or 3 bites, and that's all you need. But the food is very interesting because there's a relationship between our brain and food. And so we get pleasure from food. And not only do we get pleasure from food, but that pleasure connection, the pleasure centers in the brain that are activated from food, are responsive to chemicals that are manipulated or that are created artificially and exogenously. There's a place in Philadelphia called the Mennel Institute and it's funded by the drug companies and by food companies. And by the way, drug companies and food companies are connected. And food is probably the most powerful drug that we interact with on a regular basis. And so there's a very important relationship between food companies and drug companies. And these food companies and drug companies have funded this place called the Mennel Institute, where they study how to make chemicals, how to make molecules that will activate parts of your brain that will keep you eating the Lay's potato chips. So you can't stop eating the Lay's potato chips. So these biochemical processes that are evolutionarily refined and honed to make sure that we don't starve to death. Nobody in this country starved to death for a long time probably, but these are mechanisms that were in place from the African savanna are being hacked into by molecules nefariously that aren't even on the ingredient deck. You can't even see them. They say natural flavors, or they have some kind of disguised terms. So we're coerced to eat against our will. And then to compound the problem, because we get a pleasure from eating, if our lives are not pleasurable, food represents an easy way to get pleasure.
Right.
And so if you have the worst life, you have bills and you have sickness and you have a bad relationship and a bad job, when you take that spoon and you move it down into the Ben and Jerry's or the Haagen-Dazs ice cream, for that moment that spoon is going down and hitting the Haagen-Dazs, all your problems are gone. No problem. You don't think about your boss. You don't think about your kids. You don't think about your job. You don't think about your money issues. For that moment that Haagen-Dazs is rising up to your mouth, the world is perfect and beautiful. You eat the Haagen-Dazs, and all of a sudden your kids come back, and your children, and your job comes back, and your bills come back. So of course, what do? You go down into the Haagen-Dazs again, and you keep doing it to the point where people will lick the sides of the Haagen-Dazs or the Ben and Jerry's carton because they want every little molecule of pleasure that they're getting from the Haagen-Dazs. So what we have to learn to do is hack into our biochemistry intentionally, volitionally, through love, through activities, through curiosity, through passion, through doing something for others. There are so many ways that we can hack into our pleasure centers that are constructive, not only constructive for us in our lives, but constructive for the society and for constructive for the culture. When you're in love, you don't eat. You don't feel like eating. You go the whole day without eating when you're in love, right? You're in this high. Things are great. You don't even think about eating. They have to tell you to eat. They have to force you to eat. When you're out in the sun, when you're enjoying a beautiful sunny day on the beach, you're not bored. You don't think you're going to go, I think I got to go get some food. I got to go get something to eat. When you're enjoying your life, your hormones of pleasure, your hormones of joy, your hormones of effectiveness, serotonin and dopamine, and even to a certain extent cortisol, they're high and your appetite goes down. Appetite and food, our appetite increases when we're bored, when we're in distress, when we're depressed. That's when we eat the most. So learning to manage your emotions and learning to manage your thoughts, and even learning to manage your spiritual connection, your connection with the divine force, your connection with God, those are strategies that you can use, as well as all the physical things we talk about. When people start supplementing, they eat less food because now they're getting nutrients. When people start exercising, they eat less food because now their body is, their biochemistry is responding to working out and to growing, so you're not as hungry. Now, after you exercise, you may eat, but while you're exercising, nobody stops and decides they're going to have a hamburger in the middle of lifting weights. Nobody stops, in the middle of your workout at the gym, you're not, I got to go get some ice cream. While you're doing things, while you're hacking into your biochemistry in a positive sense for you or for the culture, you're not going to eat. And those are the things that we want to learn how to do. But again, it comes back to understanding how we're put together.
Awesome, Ben. So let's segue that into, since we titled this, how to have a healthy immune system, which really
the same thing.
Yeah, we've been discussing that for the last almost hour. So segue into that though. In a couple minutes as we wrap this podcast up. Segue into what is, if you're going to do something to keep a healthy immune system, what would you recommend? Well,
there's several strategies. First of all, probably the most important thing from a physical perspective is to keep the sugar out and the processed fats out. Processed fats and sugars are the two worst foods that we ingest on a regular basis. Especially sugar has a very powerful suppressant effect on the immune system. And sugar doesn't have to be just sweets. It can be bread, it can be pasta, it can be rice, it can even be oatmeal. Now, I'm not saying that these things are necessarily bad foods, but just controlling your intake of them. Certainly processed sugars are a big problem. That's one thing you want to do. The second thing you want to do is, and this is really interesting because we have almost nefariously, I'll say, we've created a culture of fear. Fear suppresses the immune system. When you are scared of being attacked, of having your immune system attacked, that's when your immune system is suppressed. That's when you're most susceptible, is when you're scared. So managing your emotions becomes very important. And then from a strictly nutritional perspective, vitamin C is the great king of vitamins. In fact, vitamin C is so pluripotent, so multifunctional, that it's almost like in a league of its own in terms of nutrition. And the recommended daily allowance, the RDA, which I call, by the way, the RDA, the ridiculous deficiency allowance, is designed, It's designed to keep you ridiculously deprived of the amount of nutrition you need. So you need grams of vitamin C, not 100 milligrams a day.
The RDA is 60 milligrams of vitamin C. That's how ridiculous. Most people can realize when you say that. That's how ridiculous the RDA is. Yeah.
Ridiculous. Animals make their own vitamin C, right? Humans don't make vitamin C, but billy goats and squirrels and birds, and they all make vitamin C. When a goat is stressed, it will make 5 grams of vitamin C. And they're telling you all you need is 6 milligrams of vitamin C. So vitamin C all day long, and it's water soluble. So you have to kind of keep your body flooded with vitamin C, because you're urinating it out, especially if you're drinking a lot of water. A lot of people are drinking water, and that's a good thing. You want to stay hydrated, but the more water you're drinking, the more you're urinating, and the more you're urinating, the more water-soluble nutrients are leaving your body, right? So the more water you're drinking, the more vitamin C you need. The more water you drink, the more B complex you need, and the B complex is also very important. And also electrolytes, potassium and calcium and magnesium. You're urinating all these out the more water you're drinking. So all of these are very important. Vitamin D is another one that's really important, but not just, vitamin D is so multifunctional, right? And every day you hear another function, another role that vitamin D plays in the health of the body. That's because vitamin D has one really main role, and that role is to help the body absorb calcium. And when people think about calcium, they tend to think about the bones. But calcium in the bones is just one of the bones are just one of the places calcium works. Obviously, you need calcium for your bones, but calcium is really an activator. Cells need calcium to do their business. A muscle cell needs calcium to muscle. A heart cell needs calcium to heart. A blood vessel cell needs calcium to blood vessel. A skin cell needs calcium to skin cell. Cells need calcium to do what they do. And without vitamin D, you can't absorb calcium. So vitamin D is important for everything. And of course, we know the best place to get your vitamin D is not a supplement, and it's not food. The best place to get your vitamin D is from the sun. Praise God. Vitamin D is so important. Vitamin D is so important, Shawn, that God didn't want to take a chance on us getting it from food. He wanted to make sure that you got it from the sun, right? That we got it on our skin. But of course, today, we're all wearing sunscreens, and no surprise, as a skincare guy, no surprise that just last week or 2 weeks ago, they found carcinogens in your sunscreens. I could have told you that just from when I ordered sunscreens in my pharmacy. It had a skull and crossbones on it. That was my first clue to the problem with sunscreens, right? Right. So get out in the sun. That's one of the best things you could do for your immune system. Don't stress yourself. Don't burn, but get some sunshine head to toe. Lay out in your bikini or your bathing suit. And if you don't have, you live in the Great Northwest or wherever it is, and there's not a lot of sun, get a sun lamp and expose yourself to UVB. It's the UVB, the burning ray, that gives you the vitamin D. So that's also important for the immune system. And then and I know you know this, there's a molecule in the body called glutathione. And anything you could do to build glutathione is going to be critically important for your immune system. Glutathione is activated by selenium, which is one of the all-time great immune minerals. And then zinc is another extremely important immune-boosting mineral. And interestingly, melatonin has immune-boosting properties. In fact, when Trump went to the hospital, that's one of the first things for COVID, that's one of the first things they gave him was melatonin. So melatonin has another immune boosting effects as well. So reducing your sugar, exercising, reducing your fried fats and processed fats, making sure that you're getting enough vitamin C, getting out in the sun for vitamin D, using melatonin, building glutathione, selenium, protein. Of course, the immune system is largely made up of protein. That's also very important. And then, and this is probably the most important thing of all when it comes to good health, strengthening the digestive system. Making sure, number one, that you've got acid in the stomach. Most people think that they got too much acid. That's not the case. Hypochlorhydria is much more significant than too much acid. Antacids are the best-selling over-the-counter drug there is. In the nursing home, I used to work as a pharmacist in nursing homes, and everybody's on antacids there. As if when you're old, you're making too much acid. When you're old, you don't make too much of anything, right? It's not like when you get older, everything is suppressed. The reason, you don't make too much acid when you're older. In fact, hypochlorhydria, low stomach acid, is much more significant a problem than too much acid. So reducing your, or making sure that you're acidifying your stomach with apple cider vinegar or using HCl drops. Do you make HCl drops in the pharmacy? There are pharmacies.
We do not. But we sell betaine HCl.
Betaine HCl, exactly. And then enzymes, probiotics, of course, keeping the intestine healthy. If you have leaky gut, which is a serious problem, and one of the biggest reasons why leaky gut is so predominant is because of inflammatory fats. There's a very important relationship between inflammation at the level of the intestine and fried and processed fats. So making sure you're strengthening the intestine is also very important. And then the mental and the emotional strategies as well. Don't let fear into your life. I watched the news a couple of weeks ago, and I have to watch the news because I got to see what's going on in the world. I'm always wondering what they're trying to get me to think. Don't pay attention to what they're saying. Pay attention to where the direction is going, what they're trying to make you think. So I wear this psychological hazmat suit when I watch the news, and I was watching the news, and every darn story was fear. Even to the point of they had to tell me, I live in Colorado, they had to tell me that 3 people died in a flood in Tennessee. Like, what did I need to know about that? How did that make my life better to hear that 3 people died in a flood in Tennessee? That's the extent of the fear, and every story is about fear, whether it's Afghanistan or Trump or January 6th or COVID or literally every story, not 99 out of 100, 100% of the stories are about fear. So when you're in fear or when you're in anxiety, your immune system becomes suppressed. So get that out of your system. Get these Satan behind me. To me, it's a question of parasympathetic and sympathetic, Jesus and Satan, if you want to be theological about it, if you want to be religious about it. It's about fear versus love. That's the primal dichotomy. It's the primal distinction of emotions that we have is we're either in fear or we're either in love. And just like Jesus says, you're either with me or against me. You're either parasympathetic net or sympathetic net. Get yourself parasympathetic net through slow, deep breathing, through the divine force, channeling it, pulling it into your life, loving somebody, even loving a dog or a pet. When we love something vulnerable, that activates our parasympathetic nervous system to the extent that when somebody comes from Afghanistan or Iraq, they'll give them a dog. Why? Because the dog is vulnerable. And when we love something vulnerable, whether it's a child or it's a dog or it's a bird or even if it's a plant, it activates our parasympathetic nervous system. It activates our rest and digest nervous system, and it supports our immune system and our ability to deal with our environment.
Awesome. I love it, Ben. So as we wrap this up, tell us, I think it's been rather obvious over the last hour what you have a passion for, but go ahead and sum that up in 30 seconds. What do you have passion for?
For helping people understand their bodies, for helping people understand how they're put together spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And let me say this just last minute. I love the word passion, but people are always amazed when I tell them, I talk about the word passion, I talk about it a lot. So what is the opposite of passion? Do you know? Etymologically, by the word, what's the opposite? You'll never guess. It's because it's really shocking.
I'm at a loss.
Action.
What?
Action is the opposite of passion, right? Because act, A-C-T, means to do. Pass, passive, means to not do. So what is it about? Because when you think about passion, you think of action, right? So there seems to be something weird there. When you're passionate about something, it's pulling you. You're not doing anything. Right. You're being done, right? So find what it is that pulls you, that you can't do anything about it. You're so passionate about it, it's making you do it. And so for me, what makes me get up in the morning, what wakes me up in the morning is being able to help somebody. Just like on this call, I don't know, hopefully we help people. I got 3 minutes. I'm going to be on my radio show. Hopefully I'm helping people. I'm going to go to my lab. I'm going to do an interview at the TV station. Hopefully I'm going to help people. When the interviewer leaves, I'm going to be making stuff in my lab. Hopefully I'll be helping people. That's what gets me moving. That's what pulls me. That's what my passion is making a difference in people's lives.
Awesome. Well, I think you're doing that. And you definitely achieved our goal today of educating and empowering consumers to take charge of their own health. So, Ben, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Pharmacistben.com, I'm assuming?
Yeah. My blog is pharmacistben.com. My skin and health products are at truthtreatments.com. And I've completely changed the way skincare is done. Excuse me. So if you go to truthtreatments.com, you can check out our thousands of 4- and 5-star reviews. And you can always email me at ben@ksco.com.
Awesome, Ben. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Shawn.
Yeah, and listeners and viewers, I so appreciate you tuning in today. Stay tuned because we will have this edited version on YouTube and edited on YouTube, and we'll share it there. And we'll share some short little clips too, so Ben can share those on his sites, because I really appreciate him being on today. We've had a great show. It's like I didn't even need to talk today because Ben was doing it all for me, and that's what I love of being a host for this show, and a great guest you were, Ben. So thanks for tuning in today. You've been listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.